Welcome to Three, a show about Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic, and part of the Tennis Channel podcast network. I'm Gil Gross with Joel Drucker and Amy Lundy. We will be recapping the Tokyo Olympics and looking ahead to Rafa Nadal, heading on to Washington, D.C. in this show, and beginning with Tokyo. And we covered going into these games that the Olympics have been a difficult place for Novak Djokovic, and it's fair to say that has continued as he had a very, very difficult 48 hours, really, from the Alexander Zverev semifinal match, which he lost in 3 sets after looking in control, to losing at the mixed doubles thereafter that, and then ultimately losing the bronze medal match to Pablo Carreño Busta. And then a lot of things going on off the court that put Novak in a bad light, both some things that might be fair and then a lot of things that are unfair. So we leave Tokyo, and certainly Djokovic won't be satisfied with his trip. But Amy, what are your biggest takeaways, and how do you feel about Djokovic's 2020 Tokyo Olympic Games?
Wow, it was really eventful, and I really did not see that coming. I don't think any of us did. We all thought, well, this is a great decision for him to just take a flyer and to play the Olympics because it's sort of a can't lose proposition. You know, if he doesn't win gold, then he's still got the calendar slam, and he gave it his all and tried his best, played for country. I don't think I saw that he would be in some sort of a cultural firestorm on multiple fronts. But he said that he would bounce back, and I really think that he will. I think the whole situation with everything that happened in those 48 hours is very layered and nuanced, and there's really different subjects and topics. So hopefully we can address it here and get into some good discussion.
Yeah, it was quite a time for Novak. It's so interesting how it went. I mean, we saw he was just rolling through these early rounds, doing well, and he's going to play Zverev. Oh, well, he lost. Well, that's unfortunate. That happens. But then some other things, including the throwing the rackets and breaking a racket when he's playing Carreño Busta, who he played at the U.S. Open. That was his U.S. Open match with the where he hit the ball, and that was unfortunate. I feel particularly bad for his mixed doubles partner, and Novak cited a shoulder injury, and I hope he recovers from that. But it was a cascade of a few things that just I don't know, is unfortunate, because again, I thought he seemed on path to win the Olympics. Though I will say for what it's worth, and I know this sounds a little persnickety, the concept Golden Slam kind of vexes me a little bit as a tennis person. Now it seems like the super duper bowl. It's like the slam itself is pretty darn good. So then when it's got called the Golden Slam, which Graf did after she'd already won the first 4. So this was in the middle, but I don't know. I think Novak, he's going to rebound quite fine. I mean, he's had adverse moments that involve non-tennis stuff and emotions, and he seems to snap out of those pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's start where you ended, Joel. And again, there are a lot of things to cover, from the on-court frustrations and, as Joel, you alluded to, throwing the racket into the empty stands and all that, to comments he made that have been really objectively completely unfairly twisted by certain media outlets and journalists out there. But let's start with losing the Golden Slam first. Coming in, I think we all had different feelings on what the Olympics mean in terms of a tennis player's career. But we all kind of landed on, if Novak wins New York, no one's really going to look back in 10 years from now and say, well, remember 2021? That was the year that, Novak won the Grand Slam, but he lost at the Olympics. So, he really lost a big chance. That will feel like such a subnote of a subnote in what would ultimately be this historically dominant year from Novak Djokovic.
I agree with that. I do think, though, that it could have been even more of a subnote if things had gone just more smoothly or by the book, and he had just lost without incident. I do think, though, that he's still got this remarkable chance for greatness, and that in the end, when we're looking back, if he does go on to win the calendar slam, we'll think of all these different things that happened to him over the course of the pandemic, and yet he was able to prevail throughout all these bumps and bruises. So I do think that the chance for sort of immortality, if you will, is still there.
Absolutely. Look, even if he doesn't win a match the rest of this year, he's incredible. I mean, he's won the first 3 majors, and he's favored to win the 4th. Didn't help his cause on the lovability front with the temper stuff. I mean, I have to say that not one of his finest hours to try to be a great player and a sportsman and all the things that he knows, and he knows that. I mean, he knows that, and his contrition, and he will move forward. I mean, he's not going to kind of rationalize it. I think he's kind of classy in realizing his humanity. I mean, he speaks about that, and he's aware of that. But I think, again, that it's so interesting in this show how we jockey around the Federer fans, the Nadal fans, the Djokovic fans, how they all feel about these players. But this was not one of Novak's most shining moments with the temper tantrum stuff.
I think he knows it's a flaw. He's been asked about it before. He's spoken about it before. He's not proud of the fact that sometimes he lets the emotions get the better of him, and that he loses control of his temper, and it comes out in ways where he's outwardly taking out his frustrations on his racket or a tennis ball or something. But I think the one thing, the way I look at it is perfection isn't always what is attractive to people in terms of, who you like, who you love, what you forgive, what you connect to. And I don't blame anyone who thinks less of Novak Djokovic because he smashes a racket occasionally. I also don't think less of anyone who says, I prefer Nadal. That is what I like, right? One thing that I never want to do is tell people who they should like and why. But certainly the fact that Djokovic sometimes does lose control, that is part of him. And it is a flaw that I think he would admit to.
What if you're somebody like me who actually likes both of them, for who they are, and for the, for the flaws and the great things. I mean, what's interesting to me about Novak right now is, and it's really unlike the other two, Nadal and Federer, Novak to me right now is like this giant mirror of who we are as a human race. We're living in these times that are flawed and tumultuous, and yet there are these moments of greatness as well. And I just think that he's reflective of all of us and as human beings, and that's why I really am a fan of his. But in terms of the racket antics, I noticed that when he tossed the racket into the stands, it might be a minor thing, but I noticed that he gave it a look. And I think if I'm reading it right, he saw that there wasn't anyone there before he tossed it. So maybe, I'm letting him off easy or whatever, but I think that's an upgrade over what happened at the US Open. But the other thing that I always, because I wrote a big story on this and I put a ton of research into it. The other thing that I'm always looking at is how we perceive or treat men when they lose their temper versus women when they lose their temper. And I know that Pablo Carreno Busta was questioning why it did not seem that Djokovic was either given a warning or a penalty on the second abusive racket. And, we know from what happened to Serena Williams that she was judged very harshly and penalized very harshly for that. So there may be something because it was the Olympics with different rules or something like that, but I've always got my antennas up because I did a lot of research on this, and I did my research, and my data did find that women are penalized more harshly for these kinds of things. That being said, just looking at the incident with Novak, I do believe that players should be allowed to vent, and there is room for that as long as it's within the rules and nobody gets hurt.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm sure they hadn't accommodated the if you throw the racket and there's no one in the stands. I mean, these are very and I like your view of the broader culture, Amy. I think that's really fascinating, and I think that's one of the things that makes tennis compelling. We've got individuals, and they're existing in times and in places, and the things that occur, and again, our own self that relates to them. I mean, I think the fun part about following tennis year after year is how our emotions change and our own relationships to people change and to ourselves. I mean, I used to go way back, I used to win sportsmanship awards when I didn't like Jimmy Connors. But then when I started to see why I liked Jimmy Connors, it helped me win more matches because I saw something else going on, what the game was about. So there's this sense of coming to ourselves and the game and just watching it for the game, but also the connection. I think one of the reasons the sport constantly succeeds in spite of all the things that can happen in tennis is the elemental relationship of watching, like Agassi says, two people trying to figure things out. And that's what we're all trying to do. So yeah, you're very aware of Novak's humanity. And I agree with that. And the fact that he recognizes that and he struggles with that and he tries to figure it out. And I agree completely that this was something less so than what happened at the US Open, but it's going to be, and again, and it's just going to be intriguing to see. And then we've got two other guys, Nadal is unbelievable how he does things, but he has his ways of how he behaves in other ways too. So it's interesting how Nadal was taught by his uncle and all these different lessons. It's very interesting.
They have all made mistakes. We don't need to go through all of them, but all of them have made mistakes. To get a little bit granular, I feel like there's a difference between throwing the racket in the crowd, even empty stands, and smashing a racket. One seems just a little bit more in control and just a little bit less hazardous. And I do think that, I never have an issue with a smashed racket. I do think that he shouldn't do things like throwing racket into an empty stands. I do think that it's it could be a hazard. And even if he looked and he checked, it just has the appearance of being a little bit more out of control. But I have no problem with racket smashing, really. And I get people who do, but I don't believe in monkey see, monkey do. And I think we should address this. We might have different feelings on this. But the idea, I think that what Nadal would say is you shouldn't smash a racket. It's a bad example for the kids. And that, there are children who would love to have a tennis racket in the first place, and that it's an expensive piece of equipment and that you shouldn't treat it that way. And I totally see where that line of thought comes from. And I think, I get that, but that is like, should MMA not be a sport because anyone who watches is going to start beating people up? And I don't believe in that.
Whoa, wait. MMA, those are the rules of MMA. The rule of tennis is you're not supposed to break your racket. That's a rule of the game that we agreed to.
The rule is you get a warning. Right.
Yeah, so you should never.
And he didn't get a warning, did he?
He should have gotten a warning. That's another
discussion. And then he might not do the second one. It's like Novak is really good at calibrating that kind of thing. Like he'll get a warning for slow play and then he won't get anywhere near that again. So why the chairs do this, I just don't get it.
I agree. By letter of the law, like it's insane that he didn't get a warning. But do we have a problem every time a player smashes a racket? Is that always an issue?
I'll talk it this way. Look, first of all, the pros get the rackets for free and they're playing for high stakes and money. Yeah. As a behavior model, though, and this is where I went, my pilgrim's progress through emotions of being repressed in sportsmanship awards. Then I went through this expressive stage. And then it was what I'm doing with this. And I'll use a temper tantrum as a connection to the racket. I was playing someone once, and he kept losing his temper at times. And finally, I said to him, "Am I that bad? Am I that bad a player that you're? I mean, why are you insulting me by getting angry at me winning points from you? You see what I'm getting at? So my opponent, for example, at the pros, it's the very highest level. But if I'm playing someone who is so angry that they break their racket, I want to say, you're losing points. Would you use your temper that way if you were hitting with Roger Federer? Oh no, I would behave properly when I was hitting with the great Roger Federer. So, okay, pretend it's Roger Federer. In other words, so what I'm doing, if I break a racket while I'm hitting with you, Gil, I'm more or less saying, who are you that I should be losing points to you?
Okay.
I'm insulting the game that way.
I usually felt differently when my opponents had.
Well, the other thing I feel when they break the racket is like, ha, I'm on my path. They're melting.
Yeah, I usually, and I felt like a bad person for this, but when my opponents got really frustrated, I had to hold back from smiling because it would almost make me smile, and I had to try to not smile.
Of course, because they're so weak. Because right, the thing
because I got them. Like
right, they're disintegrating. They're keen to lose.
Right.
So but in a way, so is it a behavior act or is it a character flaw or what is it?
Right. The point is though that I'm making against kind of the child thing. I grow up watching tennis, watch the pros smash my racket. I'm not going to smash my racket. I'm never going to smash my racket because the pros did. It's $200. My parents are not going to buy me a new racket, and I'm not going to do that. It doesn't matter how many rackets my idol. I don't think I ever saw Federer smash racket. It doesn't matter. My favorite player, Federer, growing up, doesn't matter how many rackets he could have smashed. I would not have done it. So I just don't believe in this monkey see, monkey do kind of like, Well,
wait, but a few minutes ago you were making it seem like it's all right. I mean, yeah, it's all right for my opponent to do it because in a way it's helping me win the match, but it's not right. For example, I wouldn't want to encourage anyone I was coaching to do it. But yeah, this is a good thing to do. Let out some steam.
If I was coaching a pro, I would not have a problem with it. If I'm coaching someone who needs to buy their rackets and needs to take care of their equipment correctly, then I would have a problem with it.
So it's economics.
I mean, my thing is like, well, that's good for you, Gil, and that's how you are. That's how your personality is combined with how you were raised. There are kids out there that just it's in their DNA that they're going to be a little more temperamental, and seeing someone, their idol, smash their racket, it may signal to them that that's okay for them to do. But you know what? You're allowed one racket smash within the rules. So the just like, when somebody sees a kid misbehaving, they often blame the parents because they're like, you're not instilling proper discipline. I'm mad at the chair. It's like, follow the rule book. He's allowed one racket smash where he gets a warning, and then he can't do it again, or else he gets punished. And the fact that the chairs get permissive, it exacerbates the problem.
Spoken like a parent. I mean, that's right. So it's this thing about discipline and behavior. No, okay, it's a racket, so a guy. But I mean, and I just think when pros do that, not just the signal, but also it speaks to some weakness on their part. And Novak knows that. He's addressed that many times. So I admire him for admitting to his deal with it and not just doubling down and saying, well, you go try to win a tennis match. He knows that doesn't aid his cause in any real way. But again, it's a tricky game, and it's tricky, that emotional aspect in an individual sport. It's a hard thing. And there are not a lot of ways you can vent anger in tennis.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, people took that public, the on-court behavior and saw it as an opportunity to couple it with opinion pieces about a supposed hypocrisy about something he said in the press conference around Pryor, where he was asked, and the premise of the question, and anyone who has been in a press conference knows that journalists have a terrible habit of justifying their question before they ask it. So they'll make a statement, and in this case, the statement was, "Hi, Novak, with everything going on with Simone Biles and everything." It was this very kind of, this is why I'm asking the question statement. to start the question. And then came the actual question, which was, how do you handle pressure in elite sport? And Novak quotes Billie Jean King and says pressure is a privilege, and that it's basically part of the deal to be at the top of the sport is to handle pressure. All of that is a paraphrase. And a lot of people in tennis media posted that quote without context, which they knew very well how people were going to take that without the proper context of what the question was. And then suddenly you had in the mainstream media, people who don't usually cover tennis with think pieces in the San Francisco Chronicle, in La Equipe. Like you have all of these pieces about Djokovic lectures Simone Biles. Djokovic critiques Simone Biles. He was not. It is a lie. And to see it completely get blown up, and for so many people who don't follow tennis, don't watch tennis, but are exposed to these mainstream media sources, to see them be fed this information was really frustrating and really difficult for me to watch.
Isn't it strange how our sport tends to generate its biggest crossover headlines when things go awry? You know, when something, there's a statement like that, and then otherwise it's like, okay, back to tennis. But yeah, I mean, Novak's answer, the question was, how do you handle pressure? And he just said pressure is privilege. That wasn't the answer to the question. The answer was, the answer just indicated what he acknowledged pressure to be. He didn't say, well, I breathe, I meditate, I do these things. He didn't say how he handled it. And of course, it's not easy. I mean, he just acknowledged that it existed. You're right. And then these things get twisted. And this, by the way, is why I'm so glad I write about a sport, because I don't want to treat sports like it's politics. Just like I don't like seeing politics treated like a sport, you know. And in politics, that's what politics is. It's words upon words, back to words. But at least we have a thing that's called performance. So to me, and even with Novak, with losing his temper, what the person does outside the lines to me is never more than 49% of what I think about them. I want to see the performance and the tennis. And so, yeah, then it becomes this whole contretemps. What do you make of some of that stuff, Amy?
I agree wholeheartedly with Gil that Novak got a really raw deal here. And just a reminder that the context around all of this with Novak is that a couple of days prior, he had been asked about his interactions with the other athletes in the Olympic Village. And the thing that they asked him the most about and were asking his advice about on how to deal with pressure. And he was saying, well, here's how I deal with it, and having these wonderful conversations with them. And so on the backdrop of that, he's asked about pressure again. In the lead up to it is the question about the Golden Slam. Biles was thrown in at the very beginning, not as a question, but sort of just, if you read it, because I went back and I looked at the journalist's Twitter who asked the question, even he thinks that it's been taken out of context. But he throws Biles' name in there, and it just, he assumes that Novak is like up to speed and up to date on everything going on with Simone Biles. And he says something like, well, you would have heard about Simone Biles, but talking about the calendar slam, blah, 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 blah. So I think that Novak got a really raw deal here. It's frustrating. It makes me mad. And I'm on Simone Biles. Like, I'm completely supportive of this young woman's decision to do everything that she's done. And I think she's behaved in a way that is forthright. And she came out and she met the media and she said, this is what I'm doing. This is why I'm doing it. And I am so supportive of everything that she's done. And I think Novak is probably very supportive of everything that she's done, because he himself then went on to pull out of the mixed doubles. And I think that, like, if he didn't support Simone Biles and looking out for her own physical health and mental well-being, he wouldn't have done that himself. So totally game of telephone by the media there, and unfair to Novak.
It is interesting, though, how Novak started the games. It's such a great point about the athletes going to him. I mean, this started brilliantly for him. He was like the most popular guy in the Olympic Village. Everyone wanted a piece of him. And, you know, I think that's also that should be noted as well, because he's really a superstar over there, which was cool to see. It was cool to see Osaka and Djokovic felt like almost the dual stars of this worldly games with 2 billion different sports. Let's address just the tennis itself, and then we'll move on to DC. And I know for our different reasons, we did struggle to watch as much tennis as we would if you were playing, say, Wimbledon. You know, it kind of felt like, first of all, Zverev best of 3 sets, very difficult. Pablo Carreño Busta playing incredible tennis right now, but gassing out, fatigue, too much, just burnout.
I think that it was really unfair the way that this was set up by the ITF, with the conditions the way that they were. And, you know, players asked for some later start times, and I guess they adjusted a little bit, but come on, this was inhumane. And Medvedev and Paula Badosa getting carted off in a wheelchair. I mean, so when you throw that sort of conditions into the mix, I think anything could happen. Then it became like a game of pinball. It was really random.
Agreed. And also, I'll say it now, I've said it before and again, Olympic tennis event, team event, world team tennis format, all the disciplines, gold medal becomes a mixed match between men and women of different countries. What a great showcase for our sport that would be. And rather than these silo events that are just feels like, okay, yet another event. I was like almost surprised. I was jolted when I heard advantage the player's name. I thought it was supposed to be advantage country. To your country's name. That's the whole neat thing about the Olympics. And so it's still a showcase for tennis, still great for legitimizing the sport in many more countries. I mean, I think in the years to come, we're going to see some pros emerge from countries that previously had tennis, sort of like as we've seen with Greece, and look how China has really made its mark on tennis. So that's great. But please, world team tennis style format. And maybe then you also make it less of a physical burden for the players also. Because now we're playing like, if you want to make it 8-game pro sets, each of them, that's fine too. But not these matches and not this whole thing. And the geography, this was tough going to Tokyo and the pandemic and all that stuff.
Totally. And when Novak did pull out of the mixed doubles with Nina Stojanovic, he said, I don't have one injury, I have multiple injuries. And I think a lot of that emotional fatigue, I think, was also certainly something he was dealing with and something he admitted to dealing with. So it was going to be tough for him. We talked about it going in, and then the heat on top of it, which notoriously bothers Novak, was insane in Tokyo. A lot of factors. Best of 3 throw in there, because Zverev best of 3 as an underdog is just really good. I mean, that's the perfect storm for him for some reason, if you look at his career results. Ready to move on to DC. Nadal practicing. I love how the tournament is, by the way, like selling tickets for Rafa Nadal practices. They're going all in on Rafa is here. But something he said in his introductory press conference was eye-opening, which is that after Roland Garros, he kind of played off the fact that he wasn't going to play Wimbledon and the Olympics as sort of like I'm going to make sure my body's 100%. But what really happened is he was injured, and he had a foot injury that was bad enough that he did not pick up a racket for multiple weeks. It was the same foot injury that has kind of been chronic throughout his entire career, but most prominent in the very early stages of his career in like 2005 and 2004 with that weird bone in his foot. But does that change the way we look at not only Rafa's decision to skip Wimbledon in the Olympics, but also his prospects for the US Open, Joel?
It doesn't really change to me how I think about him not playing Wimbledon in the Olympics, whether he's injured or whether he's tired. He's just 35, and pacing has been so strange this last year and a half in the pandemic world of how players pace and space and train and the whole dealing with the stress. I mean, there'll be studies done years from now about how various people handle this kind of cumulative trauma of things related to the COVID. And but on the other hand, going to the US Open, I think we'll really see when we see him play some tennis in DC. And then we'll see what that's going to look like, and even how he's planning to play DC, Canada, and Cincinnati. Correct? That's the agenda. He hasn't pulled out of Canada.
No, but we'll see what happens if Nadal goes deep in DC, and then we'll see what he's going to do. I mean, I don't think he's going to play all three.
He wants to get 8 matches under his belt between now and the US Open, and that's kind of interesting to think of Nadal. This will be the most time he's ever probably spent consecutively in North America, maybe in his career, in the summer. I'm not thinking about the Indian Wells Miami swing. So I'm fascinated. I think it's great. I can't wait to see him play this summer. It's exciting. I like watching Nadal play on hard courts. Well, I like him on all courts, but it's exciting to see what he has to do on hard courts.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was pretty classy of Nadal not to say anything after Roland Garros, after he lost to Novak, like, well, yeah, but my foot's killing me, and just to wait all these months, let Novak have his glory at Wimbledon, and now tell us, yeah, well, actually, I've had this foot thing. I think that's okay, and really looking forward to seeing him play on hard court and get his hard court on and see what he's got for this stretch.
He would have said that about his injury, if I may, for the same reason he wouldn't break a racket. I mean, again, I guess when we talk about these things is how one is raised to treat the game. I think what I want to look at when we're talking about things like the emotional and psychological health of these incredible athletes is not just what makes them who they are at this stage, but what went on when they were raised and how they were taught. I mean, I think to get back to Novak, he knows in his discipline, it's like I really admire how much he was taught to play the game and what he learned, the lessons he learned, and various things from the strokes to the music to thinking about things in a broader way. So I think that's part of the education of a tennis player. And that's what's really thrilling about this game. So, as far as Nadal, I guess we'll obviously excited to see. And speaking of conditions, though, DC never exactly known as a quality of life temperature tournament.
But Nadal doesn't mind that.
Right, that's true.
Right, he tends to like the more lively. I think he thinks it helps his game. So, and he's going to sweat 30 gallons, even if it's 50 degrees outside. So it doesn't really make a difference for him.
Well, that's true.
I looked at the forecast and it's really not that bad. I don't think this coming week. The lot of the United States has been under this heat dome, but on the East Coast, we've actually been relatively cool. So I don't think it's going to be Tokyo-like conditions.
Yeah. Well, he didn't play Atlanta because, John Isner has that one locked up. So it's incredible.
Well, I don't think he was going to commit to play four North American events.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the real heat. That's
need
why.
All that.
Yeah, that's why Atlanta's the real heat, and I think.
Wait, Amy, you grew up in Atlanta, and then you went to school in DC. You're like the.
Oh yeah, you're the expert on this.
What? Yeah, do you got any Canadian or Cincinnati experience too?
Atlanta is the worst. I mean, other than like if there were a tournament in Central Florida in August or September, Atlanta is just, the humidity is like a wall. You've never experienced anything like it. I went to school in DC and it was hot, but not quite as bad as Atlanta. But again, it's, knock wood, I think the conditions are going to be totally bearable.
Good. All right. Well, Nadal, back on the hard courts, trying to get as many matches in as he can, according to the man himself, just to try to get back into the swing of things. And Novak Djokovic with some very much needed and deserved rest, while Roger Federer gears up and tries to get his knee healthy as well. That'll do it for this episode of 3. Remember, we're available on all podcast platforms. Make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing on Apple Podcasts and others. If you're watching on YouTube, like the video, leave a comment, make sure to subscribe. We will see you next time on the next episode of 3.